I'm going to do a quick review, or at least sort of an initial look at the HydrosPlus upgraded cylinders for the 220R loader. These are the 1.75 inch cylinders. There's also a 2-inch option. I just went with 1.75 because that seemed like it would do what I need the tractor to do, and I didn't want to tempt myself of doing more than the frame of the tractor can handle. I'm not saying that it'll break or anything, but I didn't want the temptation. Anyway, they just got them out of the box. Everything's real clean. Man, they're super heavy duty on the ends. Looks like you even have a couple zip ties to secure hoses, and a couple of HydrosPlus emblem stickers for the tractor. So I've got the first cylinder replaced. Here's the old stock cylinder. Here's the new HydrosPlus, 1.75 inch. A 1/4 inch doesn't sound like much, but when you see them side by side, it's a pretty significant difference. It's been pretty simple so far. I have learned a couple of tricks that made it easier. First of all, when you take these caps off, these are a flat face hydraulic fitting. Make sure that the O-ring remains in the fitting, not in the cap. In 3 of the 4 cases, when I took the cap off, the O-ring stayed in the cap, not on the fitting. And so I just use a little pick and dig that out. And then, of course, same thing, we take the old ones off, make sure the O-ring stays in the old fitting so you don't double up on an O-ring, because that'll cause leaks. Additionally, a couple things that gave me a little bit of fit. When you come back to the loader stand, you pull this, let's see if I can get to it. You pull this bolt out right here, and and that's on the back side of the lower pin. I basically remove the bolt and then put a larger bolt in the hole and use that to tap the pin out. It was a sort of a tight fit, really. Going back together was no big deal. I only pulled the pin out far enough to clear the hydraulic cylinder. That made reassembly a lot easier, because this piece of the loader, quick park loader system, the pin remained in this side of it, so the whole thing didn't pop up. So tapping it back in, I just kind of had to put a little pressure on this opposite side, and it went right in. It was no big deal. These top pins, same thing. One was a little bit tight. I had to tap it out using the bolt trick, and then of course tapping it back in, there's a grease zerk, and so I just take a socket like that and tap it in over the top so you don't damage the grease zerk. Otherwise, that's the new one installed. Hydraulic lines are hooked up. Really, it's all pretty simple. I put the loader controls in float. That way you can move the new cylinder arm in and out to fit your spacing wherever your loader's parked. I've got mine parked up high. I don't know if there's a right or wrong, but it seems like it's working. So what I'm doing here is recording my tractor's capability with the original cylinders on the 220R NSL loader. I had recorded this once at 1300 RPM, thinking maybe you would be able to hear me talk. I don't have a microphone. I'm not a YouTuber. I just thought this was going to be good information to answer questions. I had a lot of questions when I was looking at the HydrosPlus cylinders and wanted some real-world capability comparisons, so I'm doing it for somebody else, whoever that is. But you can see at 1300 RPM, I've got the total firewood as high as the tractor will lift it, with the load pretty much level, and it's maybe 15, maybe 18 inches off the ground. So after this, I'll change the cylinders and we'll see what it'll do. So now we're sitting with the new HydrosPlus 1.75 inch lift cylinders, 1300 RPM, same as before, same tote of firewood. And I ended up being able to lift it up to about 5 foot, give or take. I didn't measure it, but One thing I did want to mention is my pallet forks weigh about 300 pounds total, so there's quite a bit of weight just in the attachment itself. And also you can get into a situation where you're able to lift more than you can curl, and if you get that load up high and you're unable to curl it back, it could really cause a safety issue. So you might want to consider the HydrosPlus curl cylinder upgrade as well, and that would alleviate getting yourself into a bad situation. Well, I've put the new cylinders to the test a little bit over the last couple days. The installation is pretty easy, no big complaints. Got the sticker there because why not? I'm not the safety police or anything, but I think I'd be doing a disservice if I didn't at least mention some of the things you got to be a little bit careful of as you're pushing the capabilities of a tractor. As you can see, I've got a very homemade ballast box on the back. As I've built this thing up over the last couple of years, I started with a weight of like 400 pounds. I have a scale that I weighed the original box, and as I've added bits and pieces to it, I've weighed each piece. So I'm up to about 1,020 pounds for the total weight of the ballast box. There's no design aspect to it. It just stuck things where they would go. I do have a chain box, I guess you'd call it, or whatever. You can throw a chainsaw in there, or a gas can, and a spot for a shovel or rake or whatever. Inside the box, there's just a little bit of everything. There's a couple bags of concrete. There's all kinds of miscellaneous hardware that was at the property I live at now when I bought the place. There's parts of an air compressor, just whatever I could find that was heavy. And that's worked out really well. Now, when I'm really pushing the limits of the loader, say I'm moving a big rock or whatever it is, there's, especially on terrain that's not perfectly flat, one thing that I tend to do is I drop this ballast box as low as I can get it without it obviously contacting the ground. That seems to help lower the center of gravity. I also, of course, carry the load as low as feasible, but dropping that ballast box down really seems to help a lot. I also have a rim guard in the tires. I don't know how much weight that adds, but they're, I've just never really calculated it. And I don't have wheel spacers. I know a lot of people do. I have nothing against them. I live in Kansas, so it's not hilly all over the place, I guess. I work in and around ponds a lot, but I just, maybe someday I'll add them, but dropping the loads down on the front and the back and being real careful, I haven't had a whole lot of issue. That's just my experience. Of course, when you're carrying heavier loads, make sure you run your tire pressures a little bit higher. These tires aren't very tall, especially on the front. So just be aware that if you're not running the pressures on the high end of the spectrum, they're really going to squish down on you. But all in all, man, I'm happy. The other thing is, I was a little bit worried about the speed of the loader being larger cylinders, and it might be a little bit slower. I know the HydrosPlus performance upgrade for the pump on the 220R, people have been super happy with, and I'm sure it's got a ton of usefulness in cases where people use the loader a lot. Mine's just general farm work, and I'm not lifting up over tall truck beds where I really need that speed to be efficient. So I think it has its place, but honestly, I was impressed at the lack of difference in speed for the lift arms. If you wouldn't have told me that it was supposed to be slower, I probably wouldn't have even noticed. So anybody who's on the fence about getting the cylinders, by all means get the pump upgrade if you want that extra flow, but don't be hesitant to buy the cylinders because you're worried about the speed of the loader. Now for a minute, I wanted to mention why I went with the cylinders, the HydrosPlus cylinders, over the mechanically self-leveling 220R. I did find a used loader, and it was barely used. It was only a year old. The person who bought the tractor owns a landscaping company, and they really missed the ability to curl their bucket all the way back when filling it with things like mulch and dirt. So they traded in their MSL loader, the mechanically self-leveling loader, for an NSL loader, the stock loader like I have here. So working with the dealer on what the trade difference would be, trading in my non-self-leveling for the mechanically self-leveling, it was going to be about $2,000, and that was with a little bit of negotiating. That also involved me removing my Summit third function, which because of how I installed that, I had to cut the factory line, so I would have had to buy replacement lines for the trade-in loader and remove this off and put it on the mechanically self-leveling loader. The lines, I think one's a little longer than the other. It probably would have worked. I could have just swapped over the parts. But either way, it was going to be a little bit of a hassle, I suppose. Which, yeah, it's a Summit third function joystick and all that. I've been super happy with that. I run a homemade grapple, and this tractor with a grapple that fits the pallet forks, and I can move cedar trees like nobody's business. It's great. Anyway, back to the MSL. So why didn't I trade mine in for the mechanically self-leveling loader? Number one was the curl back. I was, if that was the only factor, I could have gotten over that. I don't, I do a lot of dirt work, I suppose, but I could have gotten over that if that was the only thing. Of course, price difference was, these cylinders I think were $850 or $900, something like that, and that was basically the extent of the purchase. Now I'm hoping I can sell my old cylinders for a couple $100, so I'm out $600 to $700 probably for what's amounted to several hundred pounds of increased lift capability, and that's throughout basically the entire swing of the loader. So from ground level, from breakout all the way up to max lift height, I've gained a lot in lift capacity, several hundred pounds easily, and it's going to do what I need it to do. So these cylinders were the perfect solution for me. The MSL, mechanically self-leveling 220R, does give you increased lift capacity. But looking at some of the testing that's been done, Tractor Time with Tim, if you've never heard of him, look him up, but otherwise, I'm sure you've heard of him if you're watching this video. The graph that he posted showed that at ground level there was some improvement, but it was 120 pounds or 160 pounds, something like that. It wasn't a ton of difference, and at max height it was a bunch of difference, like almost 50% increased lift capacity and max height. Now keep in mind they measured the max height on the MSL to be 2 inches lower, so it's close to apples, but not quite. So a lot of times what I'm lifting are large rocks off the ground, or hay bales that, of course, all I need to do is get them off the ground. I'm not lifting them to full height, or getting them off a trailer. But most of the time, that's easier than lifting them up from the ground. So I was worried with the MSL that adding 120 or 180, whatever the difference at ground level, adding that much capacity wasn't going to be enough to make a significant difference in my operation, moving hay bale or a big rock or whatever the case may be. While these HydrosPlus cylinders were definitely going to improve the lift capacity and the usability in my operation. So that was the biggest thing. I didn't want to spend $2,000 and I can only pick up a rock that's 100 pounds heavier than what I could have before. Whereas here, I've got several hundred pounds additional lift capacity at the ground. Now, obviously it's mechanically self-leveling. I really would have liked that feature because I use my pallet forks way more than I ever thought I would. But rumor is that HydrosPlus is coming out with a solution to that, to be possibly have a hydraulically self-leveling capability for these tractors. So that was kind of a trade-off. And at the end of the day, I can feather the joystick pretty well. So it's a little bit of an inconvenience, but it's not going to make or break my operation to have a non-self-leveling loader. So ultimately, the price difference, the curl back, and almost a guarantee of a solution that will do what I needed it to do, instead of a little bit of a gamble with the 220R NSL loader. Not dogging a loader. At the end of the day, if they were the same price, I would have bought it probably. But this is the solution I settled on, and I'm happy with it. Don't let the reduction in speed scare you. But if you have the money to spend, buy the pump upgrade. Be safe with the extra weight. Add air in your tires. Wheel weights if you want. I've got the big ballast box. I'm totally happy with my purchase. And shout out to HydrosPlus for a great product and being super innovative and trying to keep the price where it's pretty affordable. It might sound expensive for 2 cylinders, but they're high quality. You know what they're gonna do. I'm happy. So that's all I got to say about that. One last thing before I end this video, I failed to mention in the install portion is when you pull all those pins, I would take the time to clean them off, get all the old grease off of them, leave them completely clean until you're ready to reinstall. Put a little layer of grease on the pins when you put them back in, and then make sure you re-grease them all before you start using the loader. Having those pins out, I'm always worried I'm going to get debris or something on them, and I'd hate to reinstall a pin with foreign debris clinging to the old grease. So make sure you pull off the old grease, put in new grease, and you'll be good to go.